At first I thought that October was not going to be such a good reading month for me, especially because at the beginning of the month I fell into a kind of reading slump, and I'm not even sure if that could be called early reading slump, because I read books and I wanted to read, but I didn't really like none of the books that I was reading, and that happened. But then something else happened, and I picked up some books that I was sure that I was going to like, and then I started reading and enjoying books again. So at the end of the month I did my count and I read 9 books this month. These are some of the books. This month I started with The Warrior Hare by Cinder William Chima, and some people really love this book, and it was Booksplosion book of some month. I can't really remember which one, but I really wanted to try out her writing, and I've heard amazing things about her. But there was just something about this book that I didn't particularly like, so I didn't really enjoy reading this book, and that is because I didn't care about any of the characters. I found the plot to be kind of repetitive, and the first half of the book was pointless if you ask me, so this is the kind of book that I read and I had to force myself to read it, and after having read it at the end, now the month has passed since the time I finished reading it and I can't remember a thing from that book. So I'm not sure if I'm going to continue reading the series, because I didn't really enjoy the first book, but maybe I will, who knows. If you don't know, this is young adult fantasy, so that is really well known young adult fantasy series, and maybe you should check that out, because if I didn't like it, it doesn't mean that you won't. The second book I read was painful to read as well, and that was The Scorched Trial by James Dashner, and this is the second part of the Maze Runner trilogy. I read the Maze Runner last year and I watched the movie, and when I watched the movie I had that wish to continue on with the series, so I really enjoyed the first book and I really did enjoy the movie, although I think that the book was better than the movie. I also did a review of the movie where I explained all the differences and a general opinion of it, so I'm going to leave the link to that in the description below. But the only thing I really wanted to say about this book is that the first book was much better than this one, that I liked the first half of this book much more than the second half, and from that point, so from there, things went downhill and I really had great problems with finishing this book, and I have the third one on my shelf and I'm probably going to read it, but I really don't know when. Probably when I see the second movie, and I really hope that the second movie is going to be much better than this book. So after that I picked up Lies of Locke Lamore, and this is a fantasy book. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars, and what I have to say about this book, that it is about thieves. So the main character is Locke Lamore and he's a thief. In the description of the book we can see that he's something like Robin Hood, but when he steals money he doesn't give it to the poor ones, but he keeps it for his company of thieves. So he's their leader, and the beginning of the book really reminded me somehow on Oliver Twist, and I really loved that, so that was really great. And also I loved all the characters, and the setting was really unusual for fantasy because it is something like a Renaissance Venice, and I've been to Venice and it is one of my favorite cities, and I really love this book. And I also bought the second part, so I'm going to read that soon, and maybe when I finish reading the second book I'm going to do a review on both of these books, because I think that I'm going to enjoy it as much as I did this one. So after that I read The Kiss of Deception, and I think that I really should tell you why I didn't like it, because I've mentioned in few of my videos that I was really disappointed by this book. If you don't know what this book is about, it is about a princess named Leah, and on her wedding day she decides to run away, and we can see a theme that is present a lot in fantasy books, and that is arranged marriage. So in this book she had to marry a prince she didn't know. She had to do that to prevent a war, and she really didn't do it. So this is the first thing that I didn't like about the book, the characters, because although this is not something that we usually see in a fantasy book, this princess was really selfish and she decided to run away, not thinking about the kingdom and not thinking about all the other stuff that could happen. So she took a friend with her and they went to a village, and there they stayed at the local inn, and they both became waitresses there, and that is almost all the stuff that happens. So the setting is almost always the same. The whole book takes place in that inn at that particular village where nothing happens, and then the other two visitors arrive, one of them being the prince and one of them being the assassin. So the prince who was supposed to marry the princess, and then the assassin who was sent to murder her. The main problem I had with this book was point of views. So we can read about assassin and prince and princess, and in the titles of each chapter we know if we are reading from the point of view of assassin or for the point of view of prince. But we know their names, and we know that there are two people in this inn, and that princess know them as Rafe and the other name was Caden or something like that. But there is a lack of character development there, because throughout the whole book we know that one of them is assassin and one of them is prince, and this is something that is the most interesting about this book. So many people love trying to guess who is who, but I didn't really like that. And I thought when I started reading this book and when I got into the plot and everything, I thought if I guess from the first page who is assassin and who is prince, then I'm going to give this book 2 stars. Because I could guess, and I did guess, so I think that you also will. And I couldn't really see all those characters and their development and everything because of that. And that is the main thing of this book, and because I didn't like that, I didn't like the whole book. So now when we know who is the prince and who is the assassin, and there is some world building, but it is at the end of the book and we can't really see much of it. I'll probably read the second book in the series to see how the series will progress, but all in all, this one was not my favorite fantasy book that I read. After that, I really wanted to read something that I was sure going to enjoy, and that's why I picked up Silver Shadows by Richelle Mead, which is the 5th and almost the final book in the Bloodline series. So we have yet to wait for the 6th book, and I'm really sad because of that, because I really love this world and all those vampires and all those characters. So I'm really sorry, because we are not going to be reading about them much more. And this book was really great. I don't really see how I can tell you more about it, because this is the 5th book of a sequel series. So the only thing that I wanted to say is that I love this book more than the previous one, The Fiery Heart, and that I'm really looking forward to reading the next book, and that I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. After that, I wanted to continue on with my unfinished series, and that's why I picked up City of Heavenly Fire. It's a huge book, I know, but it really isn't, because the font is big and pages are quite thick. So I read it in a few days and I really did enjoy it, and all the characters were there. The ending was satisfying, the book was easy to read, and that's it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I think that this series could have ended with the 3rd book, but I did enjoy the last 3 books in the series, so the second 3 books, second trio. I think that the first 3 books were better than the second 3. After that, The Iron Trial arrived in my mail, so I decided to read that. And I was pleasantly surprised because I really enjoyed this book and I read it in a day. So I did a review and something like a recommendation of this book, and I'm going to leave that in the description below so you can check it out. So I really enjoyed this book and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I'm really looking forward to reading the next installment of this series, because this is going to be a series of 5 books. And this was written by Holly Black and Cassandra Clare, I forgot to tell you that. And after that I picked up another fantasy book, and that is Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. And I've heard a lot of people saying that this is the weakest Brandon Sanderson book. Well, if this is the weakest Brandon Sanderson book, I'm wondering how well is his best written book going to be. Well, this was a really good book and I gave it 4 stars. And the first thing that comes to mind when I speak about Brandon Sanderson is world building and magical system and character development, and all of these 3 things were in this book, and I was pleasantly surprised and I was really happy about that. So in this book we have amazing world, which is somehow different from all the other worlds. It is also connected with religion and I really enjoyed that. And we have amazing magical system. Well, magic is connected to colors. I wouldn't really like to tell you more about this book because I think that you should really go into this book without knowing much, because everything is so complicated and you should really travel with all these characters, get to know this world better by yourself. And if you do like Brandon Sanderson and if you read Mistborn trilogy, I would suggest you to read this one. It is amazing standalone and one of the best standalones I have ever read. But if you haven't, I would suggest you maybe to read Mistborn first and then to read this one. But if you just want one book to read, you could also read this one. It is great and I would highly recommend it to you. So yeah, this was a reread and I read Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, and I really enjoyed it, and it was a quick read, so I read about all these creatures that I really enjoyed, and I even made a tag video called Fantastic Beasts tag, so I'm going to leave the link to that below, and if you'd like to do that tag you can do it, and I really hope that you'll enjoy that. So I read Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. And at last, the last book I read this month was on my Kindle, and that was Eleanor and Park by Rainbow Rowell. I read Fangirl last year and I really enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy Eleanor and Park as much as I did enjoy Fangirl, and that is because when I started reading this book I had something in my mind about it, because all people were telling me that this book is really believable and that the romance is really believable and that all of the characters are easy to relate to. And that was the main problem I had with this book. When I started thinking about it, I realized that in my surrounding I don't know anyone who is similar to Eleanor and Park in any way. But I had a problem there, and besides that I did like the book and I found it to be really cute and easy to get into, easy to read. The characters were interesting and they were not like all the other characters in the genre, so I did enjoy this book and I gave it 3 stars, but it is more like 3.5. That would be the last book that I read in October, and I'm not really sure which books I'm going to read in November, but I have some plans, so if I make more plans I'm going to do a TBR video next, so that I can share those plans with you. And that would be all I wanted to tell you today. If you did enjoy this video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you in some of my next videos.